Hear Me Out. Messages from a Humble Monk. Chapter 38. My Perspective on Life and Death. Written by Venerable Master Hsing. Read by Miao Guang from the Foguangshan Institute of Humanistic Buddhism. Introduction. Are you afraid of dying? The same question asked differently. Do you like coming home? Face death without fear. As the ancients used to say, dying is the same as coming home. Whether we should be happy or afraid to go home is a choice that we need to make and ponder over. In the Buddhist perspective, people do not really die, because the cycle of existence is a circular one. In the process of old age, sickness, death, and then rebirth, once we are born, aging is inevitable. And once we age, illness then also becomes inescapable. After illness then comes death, which is followed by birth again. In the dimension of space, there are the directions of east, west, south, and north. If you move in these directions, you will eventually return to your starting point. For example, if I'm headed eastward from Taoyuan Airport to New York, I will arrive at my destination in 18 hours. But if I continue to fly on, 18 hours later, I will end up in Taoyuan again. By traveling around the globe, we will end up in our starting point. 1. Old age, sickness, death, and birth. Getting reintroduced to life. Once we are born, we must die and then become reborn again. Yet most people are ignorant of this inevitable process. As a result, the birth of a baby is celebrated by the entire family, where people will congratulate them for having a new baby boy or girl. The truth is, birth means there will be death, a fact that needs not wait until the end for one to realize. In the same way, what follows death will be rebirth. Therefore, what is the need to be sad? Therefore, we must reevaluate the entire process of birth and death. Our minds go through the cycle of arising, abiding, changing, and ceasing. Even at the moment when one thought arises, it is already changing and passing away, to be followed by the arising of yet another thought, and then another, without stopping. The same goes for birth and death. We are born, and then we die. After we die, we are then reborn again. And the cycle goes on endlessly. Another example is the 4 seasons. After spring comes summer, autumn, winter, and then spring again. Things undergo the process of formation, existence, destruction, and absence. When there is absence, a building can be constructed over it. But once the building collapses, there is absence again for the construction of another building. Countless high-rise buildings have been constructed, collapsed, and then reconstructed. Are we not able to see the cycle of birth and death as well as formation and destruction in all of these? When I was a young monastic, I often heard stories about how Buddhist masters from the past had passed away. Some of them were able to foretell their time. Some mourned for themselves before death came. and some bid others goodbye by announcing their time of departure. Some even treated death as a game. For example, Chan Master Fei Xi died doing a handstand, and Chan Master Pu Hua passed away after roaming around the 4 city gates. Having heard too much of such stories, added with having grown up in a time of war that has slept beside corpses and witnessed a field full of dead soldiers, perhaps it is why death no longer intimidates me. While there is no need for us to fear death, since it only happens for a short moment, we nevertheless need to be particular with the way death occurs. Some deaths are pleasant, while some are painful. In the past, some people were executed by having 1,000 knives cut into their bodies. Some had their limbs and neck tied to 5 horses that galloped in different directions. Some were clubbed to death. Some were forced into a burning pot. And some were beheaded or cut in half at the waist. These are rather cruel ways to die. However, modern-day executions are more humane. For example, criminals are anesthetized before they are shot, so that death is not as painful but similar to falling asleep. Two, the circle of life. Passing away is just like immigrating. We never really die, because life is like firewood. When one log burns out, another is thrown into the fire. While each log of firewood may be different, just like the different stages of life, the fire of life continues to burn. The chanting beads worn on our wrists are strings of up to 108 beads. As you flip from the first bead to the second, and all the way to the last, you will then return to the start again. In the same way, we go from one stage of life to another inside the circle of rebirth. Therefore, we should be able to face death with peace and calmness. Furthermore, when the body ages, it feels like the machine is wearing out and needs to be replaced. With this mindset, some elderly people even look forward to death as a way of renewal. Just as old clothes need to be replaced and broken houses need repair. Death is like changing into new clothes and having the house rebuilt. There is no need to be frightened by it. A reason to why people may fear death is the uncertainty of where they will go next. Fear arises upon absence of a clear known destination. If you knew that after death you would return to this world again, then you would not be afraid. As for myself, having always been certain that I will come back to be a monk once again, I once even suggested to Cardinal Paul Shan, in our next lives, may you still be a Catholic priest and I a Buddhist monk. Since we have a goal, death is naturally not frightening. Towards the end of his life with a terminal stage of cancer, Cardinal Shan even embarked on a farewell to life journey, thereby demonstrating a positive outlook towards death. Other than the above reason to why we may fear death, another key reason is that we define death as the moment when our physical body stops functioning. In other words, we are alive when the body is active, and we are dead when it stops functioning or breathing. This is a common view and definition of death. However, from the Buddhist perspective, life never dies. Rather, it exists in varied forms, just like water that becomes ice when placed inside the freezer. pudding or jelly when mixed with flour, and clouds once it evaporates into the air. Yet the essence of water itself never changes. In other words, while the physical form changes into different shapes, the essence of life, which is non-arising and non-ceasing, simply manifests in different forms inside different spaces. In sum, death expressed in modern terms would be immigration, where you simply move from one city to another, or one country to another. Of course, you need to be equipped with sufficient finances so that you can afford a luxurious house in your new destination. If your capital is insufficient, then you could end up in a poor and deprived place. Therefore, before we begin another round of birth and death, we need to prepare ourselves for this immigration by making sure that our provisions are plentiful. Imagine upon death that you are without a goal or provisions. It would be like you're being exiled into an unknown destination. Of course, it would be very frightening, since you do not know anything about where you are going. Three, insight into causes and conditions. Thorough understanding of the universe. Another reason to why people may fear death is their reluctance to part from life. While they were alive, they would have had family members, places and things they knew, and even wealth that they possessed. To them, death would mean a total loss, and thus they are reluctant to leave it all behind. The truth is, you will not go empty-handed, because your intrinsic merit and wealth are much more important than worldly things. What is more, these qualities are what you actually take with you upon death. Some people also fear death due to the reason that all connections established in life will be severed, and that they will be headed towards a completely strange place. In Buddhism, this is called loss of past life memory. Once you change into a new body, it is like moving to a different country whose cities, streets, shops, and people are all different. However, this is not worth grieving over because it is simply how life works. You lose some and you gain some. You can still establish new conditions and new relations. When explained from the Buddhist perspective, having been part of the cycle of birth and death for billions of years, who in this world that has ever lived was not at some point our very own parents or siblings? Who has never once been our spouse or children? If we think of it this way, people of all races, nations, or regions were all once related to us. That is why the theory of causes and conditions, dependent origination, holds that every person lives inside conditions. Once the conditions are present, we are born. And once they're gone, we then cease to be. This very idea of conditionality is in fact the key to life and death, the core of rebirth. For this reason, Buddhists follow a very simple rule. That is, to establish good affinity with others as much as possible. Once these affinities are established, your future conditions will be optimal. On the other hand, those who rarely do so will keep coming to dead ends. Therefore, whether you do or do not have a faith is not important. What matters the most to your future is whether your deeds are wholesome or unwholesome, and whether you develop good affinities or not. The truth is, some people do have similar experiences of their past lives. Say when you meet someone and you tell them, "May our paths cross again in the future." From this, one may feel an affinity from the past. Some also say, "See you in our future lives." Couples may wish to be married again in their future lives. Teachers may wish to find their pupils again in their future lives. For example, someone may say, "I want to immigrate to Europe," or "I vow to move to Australia." Sometimes such intentions can influence someone's life direction. However, within Buddhism, there are the ideas of faith, vows, and deeds. If you have a vow, the question of whether or not we can actualize it depends on one's actions and deeds as the underlying force. To summarize, the so-called truth of the universe is within dependent origination. If we are able to realize the law of dependent origination, causes and conditions, we can fathom all phenomena within the universe. 4. To be reborn in a good place. Broadly develop good affinities. In terms of what needs to be done when someone dies, nowadays the children of the deceased conduct prayer services for their parents or the older generation. Why is this so? It is wrong to think that Buddhist deliverance rituals need to be conducted so that one's parents would not fall into hell. Why not think instead of your parents ascending to heaven or back into the human world? Why send them into hell? In my opinion, while services and deliverance rituals practiced in Chinese Buddhism caters to the wishes of society, it is nevertheless irrational. The Dharma is like a ferry that carries us across the ocean of vice. Thus it serves the purpose of deliverance. However, whether the chanting services are conducted appropriately or not, or whether they're suitable to you, is another question worth thinking about. In my opinion, the best way to pay tribute to one's deceased parents or elders is by holding a commemoration service to share their virtues and good deeds, or by establishing a scholarship or a foundation to start a course in their name. This is similar to sending money to one's families and friends who have immigrated to Europe or Australia in order to assist them in some way. Buddhists are not so particular with the way their commemoration services are conducted. For example, Venerable Hsing's dying message was, "Never mind conducting a Yogacara service for me. Do not try to deliver me either. Just chant Guanyin's name and establish your own affinities. I will end up where I deserve to be." To be frank, what he meant was probably that even if he went to hell, none of us would be able to save him anyway. Or even if he went to heaven, none of us would probably had anything to do with that anyway. Just as the saying goes, live your own life and die your own death. Take your own food for your own nourishment. In Buddhism, we are still the only ones who will bear our own karmic consequences. In Buddhism, there is still a way to determine whether the deceased is headed towards a good rebirth or a bad one. There is a verse that tells what signs there are. From the eyes to heaven, from the belly to human and hungry ghosts, from the knees to animals, and from the souls to hell. In terms of whether a human will be reborn as a ghost or in another world, it is neither totally impossible, nor is it inevitable. While it is possible for one to be reborn as a donkey or a horse, it is still karma which, once born, one will move on to the next destination, so it does not mean one's future is doomed by fate. It is just like when a prison sentence has been served, there is still a chance that one may go back to leading a normal life. Nevertheless, it is best not to commit any crimes. Instead, it is more important to live as a good person or lead a normal life, lifetime after lifetime. Five, foretelling the time of departure. Living and dying with perfect ease. A few years ago, the 10th anniversary of Princess Diana's death was celebrated by her sons, family, friends, and the public in the form of a tribute that involved music and singing. Surely a good way to commemorate her. When I traveled the world, I have also witnessed people handling the death of their loved ones in a calm and peaceful manner. For them, since they had cherished the opportunity to be together happily while they were still alive, what is left to do upon someone's death is to say a proper goodbye. Some Chinese, on the other hand, fought and opposed each other in life. Couples treated each other as enemies, while parents and children detested and resented each other. When death comes, they then grieve and mourn in such an irrational manner. Such extreme attitudes are like a drama that makes life seem fake and unreal. Why wait until a loved one dies to be sad? Would it not be better to love and care for one another while that person is still alive? There is no need to grieve too much for someone's death either. Simply wish them well and look forward to the next time your paths cross again. I have borne witness to many Pure Land practitioners who were able to foretell their time of death. For example, in the 1950s, Li Qihua, president of the Taipei Chanting Association, bid everyone goodbye in the Buddha shrine moments before he passed away. Hong Kong's Lam Ling Zhang, director of Tongling Kok Yun, announced one day, "I am going to leave you all tomorrow." On the next morning, she was still sitting there eating breakfast, so others thought it was a joke. However, as soon as she finished breakfast, she turned to everyone and said, "Let's chant Buddha's name." Then, in the midst of chanting, she passed away. If death can be this easy and carefree, would not life and death all be the same? What is there to be sad about? At age 10, I was unaware that my father had died. At age 70, my 95-year-old mother passed away in America. But on my flight over there from Taiwan to tend to her funeral matters, there was not much feelings of sadness. Instead, I thought to myself, for my mother to have lived to the old age of 95 is something that should be celebrated. Of course, I did wonder if this lack of emotion made me an unfilial son. Why would I have such thoughts? Or is it because my life as a monastic had enabled me to see beyond life and death? 6. Living and dying without fear. Firm faith in causes, conditions, and effects. Now that I'm already old, the occasions of old age, sickness, and death could befall me at any time. The only misgiving I have had about death since young is that I may die a painful death, causing others to ridicule me as a monastic who struggled so much at the moment of life and death. For this reason, I have been training myself to die a good death. Up until now, I am unsure how well trained I am. But I firmly believe that death is not a big deal. Just as long as it is not painful, I will regard it as a time for deep slumber. While it is only inevitable for the flame to burn out, I'm confident that there will be no surprises. Therefore, I am fearless. As for what I have owned in this world, those things were never truly mine anyway, so they shall be returned to the rightful owners. That is, all of you. However, to say that I shall come and go empty-handed is not entirely true. What I shall take with me are the affinities which you have given me, and vice versa. Will these not all follow me when I leave? For this, please refer to the chapter on An Honest Revelation for my final words. Pure Land Buddhists often wonder where exactly the land of ultimate bliss is. As the saying goes, the Pure Land is none other than in the mind. Amitabha is none other than one's intrinsic nature. I feel that those who chant the Buddha's name shall return to this world again, because the land of ultimate bliss also exists in the human world. Even chant practitioners may return to this world again with their mental agility, knowledge, and views. Are these not the good effects of their practice of chanting the Buddha's name and meditation in the present life? There is a saying, let the man do his own cultivation and the woman hers. No matter what your approach to cultivation is, you will surely reap your own rewards. Just as Venerable Hsing once said, the nature of phenomena is intrinsically empty, while causes and effect will always be precise. You must bear the consequences of your own deeds, for there will be no one else to take your place. A usual question would be, where will I go in the future? I feel that the majority will return to the human again. Some will live a wealthy life, some will be poor, and some will live a lowly life depending on whether their merits are sufficient or not. In other words, heaven and earth all exist in the human world. Yet certain people will find life in this world to be one in heaven, while some will find it to be hell. Since human beings are likely to return as human beings, it matters where and how they sow their seeds, and in which places they shall grow them. Where is heaven? It is in this world. Where is hell? It is also in this world. As scientists continue to search for lives on other planets, I think they will be found. Yet it is unnecessary to search for water and life on other planets, because the other worlds that also exist in infinite and boundless space will surely exist in similar conditions. This is similar to seeing evidence of existing Chinese people from millions of years ago. However, historical cultures developed only with great difficulty, from the Stone Age to the Bronze Age and so forth, slowly reaching agrarian cultures, then the Industrial Age, and so forth. This is a process that has passed through such a long history. Seven, the meaning of life. Leave behind your merits. On another note, while many speak of past lives, some base their concepts only on groundless hearsay, which is just the same as listening to gossip. Whereas some others base their understanding on certain logics of reality, which is not totally without proof. So there is no need to deny nor become overly attached to the idea of past lives. If a man and a woman are meant for each other and share the same wish, then they shall meet again in a future life. If they are meant to be foes, then separation will only be inevitable. Some questions still remain unanswered, such as how long exactly did the historic figures, such as the ancient mythical Chinese emperors Yao and Shun, really live? Did the Taoist immortal Pengzhu actually live for 800 years? Although existing sources saw that Pengzhu in fact existed and that he did live to 800, the technique of calculation adopted back in those days shows that their year was an equivalent of our modern 60 days. If this were true, then Pengzhu only lived to about 140 years. And the Tang Dynasty monastic named Bodhi-Ruchi actually lived longer to 156. Death has always been given in a sense of mystery since ancient times, because there is no knowing where you will go next. However, the verse of cause and effect shows how you can see into the future. Look at your current effects for a past cause. Look at your current deeds for future effects. People celebrate their birthdays and weddings and mourn for the deceased not only by funeral services, but also weekly services, 100 days of death services, or even annual memorials. What makes the difference here is one's merit. If one is well established in merit, then one shall be remembered for as long as the sun and moon exists. If one is not, then one may simply rot away with nature. And either way, death is no longer important anymore. What legacy would you like to leave behind? What matters is not how long you have lived. What matters is that you have given meaning to the life that you once lived. End of chapter 38.